Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. We are here with the one and only LD, freelance video editor, live stream producer, content creator, apparel designer, an amazing individual. We're going to get to know him today. And LD, thank you so much for taking time to be here. Could you maybe reintroduce yourself for some people who may not know who you are?
Yeah, my name is Lawrence Driggs. It's great to be here, George. Love your energy, man, and thanks for asking me on. Yeah, I never thought of myself as an apparel designer, but I guess I guess that's where I am. That's one of the hats I wear. Yeah, my wife and I, Candace, started that store about a year ago, and just putting some ideas into action in a basic form. But yeah, I work with Richard Grove. I help produce the Grand Theft World podcast and help a little bit with production of his autonomy course and do a bunch of video editing for various clients through our Autonomy Unlimited media marketing company. And I'm something of a pig farmer now and taking care of dogs and chickens and yeah, doing all kinds of stuff.
Man, that sounds awesome to me. I'm a little jealous about the farming lifestyle. I live in Hawaii, so it's pretty beautiful here. But the way in which real estate here is, it's so expensive and things are really grouped pretty tight. So, to have a little bit of real estate, when I hear people talking about having a ranch or a yard or enough room to have some animals, it makes me think about what I'm doing sometimes. But I'm curious, how is it that you got started down this road of becoming a producer, working on the Grand Theft World podcast? What was it that got you going down this road? Did you go to school for this, or was it something you kind of learned yourself, or how did that happen?
I did not. Yeah, it's a lot of self-taught stuff. I mean, yeah, I was into music production, about a decade ago, and um, that sort of helped prime me. But I think subconsciously, I was always going to get into something like this. My dad was an airline pilot, a fighter pilot, airline pilot, but he was a big fan of Edward R. Murrow, and he would talk about him, and he wanted to go to broadcasting school. He wanted to be on the radio, and he was big into blues music on stations that were hard to find back in the day on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So I think there's a little bit of that in my blood. And yeah, I was just telling a friend the other day about when I was going to school. I was going to community college, taking a kind of lame American history course, just checking a box because I was studying kinesiology. But at the same time, I'd found Richard's work and like Jay Dyer's work and my historical understanding that the paradigm was kind of getting blown wide open. Um, anyhow, I was a fan of Steven Crowder at the time. I respect the dude. I won't I won't say anything. Anyway, he'd put out a call. I don't know. He'd put out a call for like a producer. This was maybe 5 years ago. So I remember writing down, like, how do I make myself indispensable to somebody like Steven Crowder? And yeah, find myself going through Rich's autonomy course and then working with him. And a few years later, like I'm doing that thing, not the way I envisioned it, and not with whom I thought I might want to work. But I'm really grateful that I found myself in the position I'm in, and not somebody else that's not as well read or got the books to back things up. So that's kind of the short of it, I guess.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Anybody can go to school and learn what a teacher is preaching. Anybody can go and have a cardboard cutout of a job that is dictated to them. And it seems to me that a lot of people take this predetermined road of they what they think they want, but it's really what they're told to be doing. So when you tell me you're self-taught and then you tell me the story of how you ended up where you were, I always admire that road better. It seems to me, it reminds me of, I'm a big fan of mythology and Joseph Campbell and all these old myths. And there's this old myth about King Arthur. and they're going to find the Holy Grail. And they all head out into the woods, but the one of the rules is each individual knight must enter into the dark forest in a spot that is the darkest to them, where there is no path cut. And I've always thought about that. Like, yeah, you should be going out into the world and carving your own path. Because when you find yourself on a path, that means you're on somebody else's path because it's already been worn. So so you've told us about how kind of a wide-ranging set of how you got to where you were, but what was it like? What drew you to the autonomy course, and what can you tell us a little bit about that course and what you learned there, and what it's been like working on the Grand Theft World podcast?
Absolutely, and you're echoing so much of what kind of gets addressed in Rich's autonomy course. And I guess I'm familiar with the term Dark Night of the Soul,
Mm,
and I think it's at least parallel to what you're talking
yeah.
about, and yeah, Rich often quotes John Taylor Gatto, but one of them is if you're not writing your own script in life, you're playing a part in somebody else's play. And so I think you're touching on that exactly. And yeah, that's sort of I guess that's at the essence, or the foundation of Rich's autonomy course. The early weeks get into breaking down the learned helplessness that
Mm,
many of us are indoctrinated with through the education system, which we come to find out is not really designed to educate us. It's designed to indoctrinate us and to slot us into a particular um, uh, class, or role in society. And yeah, it's recognizing that, accepting it, and then kind of moving on. And then the course moves into learning about your true potential and learning how to tap into that infinite potential that I think we all have, and many of us have just been beaten down, just been um, just squeezed into a box, or we've just been born and bred in a terrarium, and sort of especially today, a lot of people have jobs that are highly specialized, and they do very well for themselves, but it's contingent on a whole bunch of things being in place and operating in society that they never think about. And I guess that's a pepper mindset, or whatever, or just being a realist. But if those things were to fall away, what are those people going to do? And so that's another part of the autonomy course, is just um, uh, in omnia paratus is something Rich has on his shield there. Prepared in all things, and it doesn't mean that everybody's mastering everything, but it's developing an awareness for all these things. It's raising consciousness, having a higher level of consciousness, and how you operate in the world. And then yeah, we talk a lot about freedom, and the flip side of the coin of freedom is responsibility. And so it's all about taking more responsibility in more areas of your life. And yeah, I mean that's speaking of the autonomy course, and you asked about Grand Theft World. That just I think it was an idea that Rich had for a while. He had the website for a while, and back in November of 2020, it just got put on the schedule. Tyler Bloyer used to work with us, and he put a lot of that infrastructure into place. I mean, it was a team effort, but I learned a lot from him. I wasn't entirely self-taught, but had some good mentors here, and um, that's just it's hard to believe. We've been doing that 103 weeks in a row in one form or another, and it really feels like it's starting to turn into something.
yeah, I think that I'm a huge fan of the autonomy course. I'm a huge fan of you, Rich, the whole team over there, because you're constantly putting out content that not is not only something that is fun to watch, but it's something that sticks to the soul. And what I mean by that is the 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 format in which it comes out, the way in which it is designed in order to get people thinking. It almost like it's constantly begging questions from the listener. So it's interactive in that way where it gets you to think about some of the ideas, some of the lessons, or some of the things in your environment that you've always wondered about, but maybe haven't had either the time or the courage to really start thinking about. And that to me is it's kind of carrying on John Gatto's work. And for those that don't know, John Gatto is probably the greatest teacher, one of the greatest teachers in American history. And if you haven't read his book Dumbing Us Down or his other, I think he's got multiple books out there that most people should take the time to read to thoroughly understand what the education system is designed to do. It goes back to the Prussian system and kind of making today's American kids obedient workers instead of critical thinkers. And if you look at what's happening in the world today, I think that you can, while you and I, Lawrence, would call the school system today a failure, I believe there's people in positions of authority who would say this is working just perfect. What do you think?
Absolutely. No, you're spot on. I was having this conversation with my mother the other day, and she's finally started listening to the show, and it's not really her thing. Her feedback is like, well, feel like I'm sitting in on a frat boy hangout or something. Like, okay, um, yeah, it's not for everyone, and it could be for everyone, but absolutely, she did say, well, I'll give Rich this. I agree with him on the John Dewey thing, and yeah, I expressed that to her. I'm like, well, look, yeah, the education system is actually kind of successful. It's doing what it was designed to do, and so this is something we talk about often. Is, well, what is the education system? How was it designed, and who designed it, and why? And yeah, it's done pretty well for what it was designed to do. I'd agree.
Yeah. It's i- in some ways the breakdown of the world we see today, I think can be, if we're going to continue to talk about the education system and the breakdown of communication in the United States, I think should also be entered into the record that there is this fierce American spirit that loves to fight. And maybe that's, I'm partial to America because I love our country and I love the people in it. And I love the people of the world too. So maybe there's this thing about life that says we're fighters. Maybe there's this thing about life that says deep down we don't ever give up. Maybe there's this thing about life that says when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Like I believe that. And I see your guys' podcast as the embodiment of that spirit. It is this, okay, we've had enough. Now we're going to fight back. And we're going to fight back in a way that can't be controlled because we are now fighting for the hearts and minds of the people. And getting back to the message of the podcast, getting back to the message of the autonomy course, it seems to me what you're teaching in there is self-reliance through a community. Now, a lot of people would think, hey, self-reliance seems a little different than community. But the truth is those things are really connected. Is that kind of what the heart of the autonomy class is? Or what is the relationship there?
No, absolutely. I think you're evaluating it correctly. It is, yeah, it is about individual pursuits towards autonomy, but uh, it is a very strong community. It's a wonderful community to be a part of, and so when you have these people they're in that pursuit of autonomy in their lives, um, and just raising their consciousness, their awareness, and wanting to take greater responsibility because they want to be free, uh, physically and mentally and bodily autonomy. Yeah, you have an amazing group of people that just they share ideas, and ideas get put into action. And sometimes it's, you put that idea out there, and then somebody chimes in and says, well, I can do that, or I can help you with that, or I can teach you how to do that, or I know so and so. And so it's a powerful networking, but it's, not just networking. It's like stuff is getting done, and just ideas are bubbling up, and we kind of have a rule: when somebody has a good idea, then they're responsible for it. And that doesn't mean they have to do it themselves. Maybe you've got a critique of the website or something. Well, maybe you just need to be responsible for finding the person that can do the job right. So people start to get a really different, a broadened perception of the value that they have to offer, because people come in oftentimes, or they're contemplating getting in the course. I was like this myself, really struggling to put down on paper, or into a form online, what skills do I have, what do I have to offer, what value do I have to offer. And I think you start to have conversations with people and open up a little bit, and you discover maybe that you have much more value to offer than you realized, and in ways that you did not previously understand or see yourself. So there's a lot of that happening through that community.
Man, that's beautiful. I love the way you said it, and it makes me think a lot. Like, I have a lot of people in my life, and even myself have gone through situations where, and I think maybe all of us, if we're being honest, I'm willing to bet everybody listening to this has gone through periods of their life where they have doubted themselves to the point of like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, am I even worth this? And like, I've been around suicide enough to see how devastating it is. And I've been
Mm.
around enough people who have used drugs or found creative ways to destroy the beauty within them. And it's so beautiful for me to hear you say you found the value in yourself by finding out how valuable you can be. And I wish more people would take the time to do that, because it's almost like a rebirth. It's almost like you've and maybe this is something everybody has to go through. Maybe you're not a total man or woman until you go through this rebirth. Maybe you have to get to the doors, knock on them, and be like, I'm nothing, so that the door can be opened up and you can walk through and become something. But it's this idea of realizing, okay, what am I here for? What do I need to do? And then finding value in yourself, figuring out that you are the most important person in your life. At that point in time, then you can really begin to love yourself. And I think it's just there's this absence of self-love, and you see it in the communities, you see it in relationships, you see it in the way people carry themselves with their head down, walking around, people that are having problems with weight, people that have mental disorders. It's like this lack of love for self, because we've forgotten how important we are. Each individual is so important to the ecosystem. Each individual is so important to helping the next generation love themselves. And that brings me to, so you're in the autonomy course, you start producing. Is it fair to say now that you are also being a mentor to some of the younger kids coming up through those classes?
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, you know, we've got a few, yeah, more than a few people interested in video editing and learning how they can, we kind of call it shadow hosting. That's how you start out, just being somebody to help out on a Zoom call, so that whoever's presenting doesn't have to worry about participants or muting or unmuting. And you level up from there and start sharing clips and learning how to do that more efficiently, and then going beyond that in post production and publishing. So yeah, we've got a few people now. I've been running a media group meeting every Thursdays, and it's been very casual at times. There for a while, yeah, because I started trying to take that over, and I didn't feel qualified as a leader, at least in that realm. I was still learning a lot myself and feeling overwhelmed, but kind of kept the conversation going. And we had a few regulars hang in there. But yeah, we've got Cody in Arizona. He's doing great. He's been really stepping up in the past few months, helping with post production stuff, and now he's interested in a bit more live production. There's a handful of people, and it's great. We've just kept it going, and now we've got a little team, and we're pulling clips, because there's a ton of content to mine from
Yeah.
just the Grand Theft World podcast every week. It's a week's worth of content in one night, and from the when the autonomy season kicks off, then you've got another 12 hours of content sort of within the course there in the community. And then we're helping Jay Dyer produce a philosophy course right now. We've got Ryan Christian coming to do a autonomy speaking event on Thursday, and I think he's going to kick off a course sort of on independent media and evaluating sources and stuff like that. We have a whole website at the marketplace, the Autonomy Agora, of these courses we've produced in the past couple of years. And yeah, many hands working on it. Many hands make light work, and more people are showing up and interested. And yeah, and I'm about ready to. I'd been talking about it months ago about doing a production course, and I don't know, I wasn't ready, and life kind of got in the way. But I think I'm about ready to just go for it and get something started, do it live. Because I've learned a lot doing it that way, and that's what we do on the show. I don't think that'll get old. I was joking about that.
Let's do it live.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think are some differences and what do you think are some things that you have learned mentoring that are different than when you learned from a mentor? Does that kind of make sense? Like, I think that there's a whole different, while some things are similar, you get to see it from a different angle. But what is your take on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and that's why I'm interested in teaching more, because I don't know everything. And the way I do stuff isn't the only way to do it, and it's not the right way to do it. I'd say the right way to do things always involves attention to detail and sort of working things out, ad nauseum, and spending a lot of hours dealing with different things, figuring them out. But generally, I took a course from Mark Passio a couple of years back, the How to Become the True Media, and I got a lot of value out of that. And just his approach, he's so meticulous and sort of diligent with his work, so that rubbed off on me. And no, but to get back to your question, yeah, there's things that you learn teaching things to other people, because they're not totally clueless. They have some pieces together, but they don't quite understand maybe something about how you do something. And then in their asking questions or presenting a solution for something, then you learn something and maybe tie that into a process that makes what you do even better. And so it's a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. But certainly that's an old maxim, isn't it? That you master. I think you really master stuff once you're able to teach it to people, and that ties to the trivium. I'd say the input, processing, and output, the grammar, logic, and rhetoric. You have to ingest stuff and then put it all together, and then be able to output it in a coherent manner. And so yeah, teaching is certainly, that's hugely important and beneficial to all involved.
Yeah, man. It's not too often that I interview people or I talk to people who start quoting the trivium. So thank you for that. I think it makes the world a little bit better.
Good. Yeah. Yes.
There's so much wisdom in there, right? Like, and it's somehow we've gotten away from that. And it's interesting how you tie that into teaching, because that should be the foundation for all teaching. Is you need to understand how to learn before you can actually start learning anything. But I wanted to go back for a minute, and you had mentioned something about it may not be the right way, the way you've learned, and attention to detail is important. For some of us who have like learning disabilities, like myself, I never got to learn, quote unquote, what was the right way. So I had to figure out my way to do it. And even though it's not the right way, it seems to be a way in which I can figure it out. And it got me thinking, like, you know what, maybe there is no right way. Maybe the right way is the way you learn. And other people that have similar ideas or their brain works a similar way, be it, you know, extroverted or a deficiency or, you know, whatever kind of silly language we use to describe people. Maybe there's multiple ways to learn. And I think that that's kind of, if you look back at you know, the dialogue, Plato's dialogues, or even the trivium, you start learning that the best way to learn is just to ask questions. And my answer to that question may not be the same answer that you have, but it may be a path that gets us to the same result. And so I've found that people who didn't learn from somebody end up knowing ways to do it that are not only unique, but make them be an expert in their own way. I'm willing to bet if I sat down and watched you, or if even your students watch you, you're showing them ways that no one else would teach them, and I think that's invaluable. So, yeah, I'm happy to hear the language you're using, and I think that that's probably what makes you a good teacher, and will make you a good teacher. And on top of that, that's what will set your course aside from everybody else's course is the LD way.
Yeah, right on. And what just came to mind was one student in particular from the autonomy course that joined in season one, that had been a Peace Revolution podcast listener, and he's a I guess, well, he's got a bunch of animals. I was going to say pig farmer, but he does a lot out in Oklahoma. But Jordan is he's homeschooled, and he just approaches things so differently. So people come to him, to ask him to evaluate something, and his perspective is always very unique because, yeah, he didn't go through an indoctrination system. He learned how to learn for himself, and it's very powerful. And I think that's something that, for Jordan, obviously he kind of did that, and then he comes and hangs out in the autonomy course. But for others of us, the autonomy course helps us break that down, and learn how to learn anything. And that's something I definitely felt like I struggled with. I was a really good student in grade school, and kind of honors and stuff. And then I went to a boarding school for high school. I started to struggle, and you know I was diagnosed with depression, and then later, oh, maybe it's ADD or it's a combination. There's all kinds of stuff thrown at that, from the pharma angle. And but I remember in high school just thinking like, gosh, if I could just figure out what um, the best way for me to learn is, but I didn't feel like I had the time, or I just couldn't get it. I did what I could, but I always just felt like I wasn't doing it right, and like I was just kind of trying to satisfy some vague standard, that I didn't quite understand. So um, yeah, breaking that down and learning how to learn anything, and learning how to learn for yourself, or the right way for yourself is immensely powerful. It's empowering.
Yeah, I agree. Um, let's say we shift gears here for a minute and talk about depression. Like I've had multiple people in my family attempt suicide, and they were both diagnosed with depression. And I've often heard it say that depression is being trapped in the past, anxiety is being trapped in the future. But it's interesting the way in which our society, first off, diagnoses people with depression, and second off, tries to heal it. I'll start with the first part. Like, isn't it interesting that, you know, oftentimes people go to a doctor, like they don't even know the doctor. They don't know what school he's been to. They don't know anything about him. And here's this guy that's like, you have this thing. And then people are like, well, I guess I got this thing now. They don't, maybe you go to a counselor, maybe if you're lucky, you sit down and talk to somebody who's really educated in the area and has a thorough understanding of what you're going through. Maybe there's not a time limit on your counseling, but too often it's one or two people that just say, here, you got to take this pill. And this pill is going to do this thing for you to get you out of depression. But I don't think that SSRIs, I don't think that any of these pills allow people to get out of depression. I think it just allows them to feel good enough to stay in depression, to stay in the situation that has caused them to be upset about it. But as someone who was diagnosed with it, what's your take on what I just said?
I think you're right on. I mean, it kind of reminds me of my experience, and going to doctors and having parents kind of trust in the doctors and the experts and the school, acting in loco parentis. And
Yep.
um yeah, I knew. It's funny, I was I was like listening to the No Agenda show last night, and they're playing clips about the Adderall shortage, and talking about norepinephrine and serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and I knew about all this stuff at a very young age, and like, okay, well, we're going to try this, and it's going to hit this receptor, and then here's another one that'll hit these other two types of receptors. And now what, that stuff is being shown that, that there's a recent study, or an old study that was just recently kind
Yep.
of un, uncovered, or brought to light, that that stuff just doesn't work. And yeah, I played along, although I would resist, and yeah, off and on for 20 years I was on this up and down thing where um it was like I was rejecting it, but then and it's fascinating to me, if you if you don't mind me bringing this up,
Please,
this
man, please share whatever you want
yay
to. Yeah.
yay in the media. I don't know if you caught this this interview he did with Chris Cuomo last week, but No Agenda had a clip from it, and I just lost it because it was unbelievable. And see, I think the guy, I've always been kind of interested in him. I do respect his music. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, and he seemed to be like a megalomaniac, or Yeezus, whatever. But to me, I see him, he's much more coherent now. Now you can critique his approach to the subject that he's addressing right now, but pretty fascinating what's going on. But to have him go on Chris Cuomo's show on, who knows what that network is, he's not on CNN anymore, um and to have that guy be like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you all right? And then have Ye say, did you work out this morning? No, I took my meds. My antidepressants, like I do every morning. Like, holy cow. And who looks like the crazy person in that conversation? That just blew me away. I got carried away clipping that out and playing with it. To me, that his kind of observing his journey really hits close to home. And it similarly, when I was in my early 20s, and I've I was sort of primed for some conspiracy rabbit hole diving at a young age. I've mentioned this before. My dad was a TWA pilot in 1996. A 747 blew up off the coast of Long Island, and the government came up with a nice story that it was a frayed wiring and an nearly empty fuel tank and vapors, and these things happen, except it never really happens over in the Middle East or anywhere in hot temperatures. Anyway, that it's I was privy to information at the age of 11, 12 that, well, maybe the U.S. Navy shot down a jet and got away with it, and the government gaslighted the country, and that
Yep.
was 5 years prior to 9/11. Hey, I'm getting the point was, now when I was 18, 19, I went to Guatemala by myself, to go do some immersion in Spanish, and I met some dude down there at a little cafe. It was like, dude, he was from Austin. Do you know about InfoWars and Alex Jones? So I went in the internet cafe and looked it up, and I don't think I ever really got into Alex Jones. I didn't really listen to him, listen to the show, but somehow I saw something there, and then went looking at Prescott Bush and Brown Brothers Harriman and the Nazis, and I remember trying to talk to my parents about that, and oh well, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. And I was young. out of control a bit, off and on of meds and partying, and so I didn't give much credibility to myself, um, as far as the topics I was looking into. Um, so sorry, it's you know I just feel for Ye and watching his journey, and can identify with a lot of it. And yeah, depression. It well, to me, it's like it's a lack of sense of purpose. I think man without purpose, or you know anybody without a sense of purpose, they're gonna suffer needlessly mentally, and it's a tough thing. It's taken me a while to, I'm still working on it, but I have a more um understand my sense of purpose, or I have a better sense of purpose now than I did months ago. Um, and I think that's crucial to mental clarity, mental um, what's the word? But it's just not mental suffering, and we all suffer, but there's meaningful suffering that leads to growth and enlightenment, and it doesn't mean you have to abuse yourself, but sometimes it does. Like
Yeah.
you have to endure. I get some wisdom from like Jocko Willink, and that whole mentality of like embrace the suck. Just say good, like this. Oh, this sucks. Well, good. It's a another growth opportunity. AFCO, another fucking growth opportunity, as my dad would say.
Your dad sounds like an awesome guy, man. I remember that airplane going down. I remember, and there was a lot of evidence, even though it was covered up in the mainstream. There was a lot of evidence that pointed to that thing being shot down, and it was the, I don't know if it's the inability to cover things up, or the sloppiness, or the hubris in which people think they don't have to, but or maybe it's the fact that you can't cover up such huge things like that, because it goes against everything, that it goes against all logic, but I do remember that happening, on the idea of Ye. Like, I just watched him today, or part of him, on the Lex Friedman podcast. I
Mhm.
gotta say, I love that guy, man. I don't always agree with him, and sometimes I think he's a knucklehead, but I think that what he's going through right now is what a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world are going through, regardless of who is in charge and running things. There's no social mobility, and when there's no social mobility, there's unrest, because why should a kid go out and get a job? People talk about the younger generation being lazy and depressed and sitting home. Well, why should they? The people on the very top, all the CEOs, all the boards of directors, those guys have zero loyalty. They move from company to company to company for a paycheck, for a paycheck, for a paycheck. And then they get all upset when the people on the bottom do it. Oh, these kids don't want to stay and work. Yeah, because look at what the leaders do. There's not only is there no loyalty, there's no justice. There's zero justice for people. Once you reach a certain threshold, it's no longer justice, it's just us. And like, the people on the bottom aren't dumb. They may not have the same resources, they may not have had the same education, but it is impossible. It is impossible to see the corruption, to not see the corruption at the top. In Hawaii, we have a saying. It says the fish rots from the head down. And what you see out in the world today is the complete devastation, the rot from the very people who call themselves leaders. And I see Ye going out there, and I see him making arguments that a lot of people are afraid to make. I'm not saying every argument he makes is accurate, but I am saying the guy's got the courage to do it. I am saying the guy's willing to stand up for what he believes in. I am willing to say that no matter who faces him, he's making people look silly, like Cuomo. Like, look at this guy waking up, taking meds to do, like, that guy has to wake up and take medicine just to get through his day. And I'm not saying that's a problem, but on some level, when you do that, you must acknowledge that you are relying on this substance instead of relying on yourself to get better. You may always have to take medicine, but you must also take the step necessary to understand that you got to work on yourself to get better. And so when I think about depression and meds, and in an interesting way, you have kind of been doing a lot of research on neurobiology, if that's a word, like neurochemistry, since you were young. You're learning about the 5-2A receptor. You're learning about all these different things that make your brain work. And in a weird way, I bet you that's had a pretty profound effect on the way you think. But the reason I'm bringing up the brain chemistry and the SSRIs and all these drugs and the recent article about SSRIs that show them to be less effective than a placebo, and it goes in conjunction with all the Alzheimer's medicine that they're showing doesn't work. What is working is psychedelics, be it ketamine or be it mushrooms. If you look at the work coming out of Johns Hopkins, if you look at the work that's coming out of all these new places, all this new funding that's coming up, what you're seeing is that psychedelics have the ability to make connections in the brain. They have the ability to remake connections in the brain. And the way I liken it to, and this is just my opinion, is that I knew a guy who had a stroke. When I was a young kid, this older guy had a stroke and he had to teach himself how to talk again. And that really interested me. I'm like, how did he do that? And what was explained to me is that when he had a stroke, no blood went to this part of his brain. And so that those connections died in his brain. So he found a way to make new connections to get him to learn to speak again. You have to relearn everything over again. And when you look at the work of psychedelics, they have some study. There's a study out of Johns Hopkins with fMRIs, and it shows brain scans. And in one brain scan, what you see is the connections of a normal person who is asking questions while they're in the fMRI. And then they take another person who's on a medium dose of psychedelics, and they show all these different connections in there. And people are going through, they are learning that they can use psychedelics and they can be cured of PTSD in a matter of like 4 or 5 sessions. The level of psychedelics versus placebo is off the charts. Psychedelics are doing better. They make SSRIs look like, candy Pez or something like that. And there's no addiction. There's no need to continue to do it. There's no long-term profit motive for the pharmaceutical companies. And I'm excited to hear about it. And I'm curious, have you ever experimented with psychedelics? And if so, what do you think about what I'm saying? And what is your take on psychedelics?
Yeah, I have certainly when I was younger and more in a reckless experimental kind of party approach, I guess you'd say. But then more recently, having it's since about April of 2020. That's when I took the last of the pharmaceutical antidepressants that I was on, and that was a long journey.
Mm.
That was hugely big thanks to my wife Candace and her disbelief, her incredulity that I needed that stuff, and and it became a mental, just a real grind. Like I got to drive out to see the doctor every now and then and get a prescription, and then I have to go to the pharmacy every 30 days, and and then I'd be like, well, what if everything falls apart and that's not available? Then what? And you could kind of look at any kind of habits or anything you rely on in that way, have a healthy balance. But for that stuff, and I used to just sweat. My body was just trying to like push out these toxins, and I had trouble sleeping and all kinds of, when I was younger, just weight problems, and I had really bad nutrition for a while. But I think, gut health was something affected by this stuff. So, yeah, within the past couple of years, especially last winter, and I did a ceremony with a dear friend, back in August of 2020 with some San Pedro, and that was an interesting experience, and it sort of helped propel me into what I've been doing the past 2 years, I one of the things I left there with was a note saying I am doing it, and
Yeah.
I posted that on my monitor. And at the time, you know, I was still working at Home Depot and I was doing some video editing, and I just built my computer. Candace and I built it together, and but I wasn't making money, and I didn't really have a great plan. But I was just, well, I guess I'm gonna do it. So that was a mantra that I stuck with. But there were lots of ups and downs, and you know, you could ask my wife. It was not easy. It's incredible how that stuff kind of, there are these waves, and you start reducing it. The doctor doesn't really help. Um, it was like pulling teeth trying to get the doctor to help me with the plan to ramp off something. And yeah, it, you notice these some subtle things, and I used to be um just, I felt like this oversensitivity to stuff, and maybe that's because I wasn't out, you know, working enough, or doing hard stuff enough. But you know, I was working, I was doing things, I was trying to, I'd gone through a journey of, you know, really being down and out, and difficulty with substance abuse, and including pharmaceutical
Yeah.
medication, and then kind of getting out of that and getting control of my health and my diet, and learning things along the way. But still was really struggling with some things. And yeah, so in the past year, um win last winter, definitely really kind of got down. And yeah, some microdoses of psilocybin helped me immensely, and really helped me with creativity to an extent. But it's more of a, like you described, this this friend that developed new pathways in the brain. I mean, I feel like I can feel that, especially like becoming one with a computer, sort of like uh, warding off tangriness, we call it. You know, being angry with technology. There's something about the mushrooms that seem to help, and I know that's definitely a thing in like computer nerd culture, and old school programmers. They're definitely like you know, speaking with the mushroom a little bit. And but I also want to address, like, I think we have to be careful, because and I don't know if it was No Agenda or something else I was listening to recently, but it's like all of a sudden big pharma is kind of getting pounded, and there's this sort of revealing, and now there's this good research, and Johns Hopkins, I mean, kudos
Yeah.
to them
Right.
for doing it. It is Johns Hopkins. We got to keep an eye on them. I'd say. I think there's a danger that people. It's like with the legalization of marijuana, uh, stuff becoming readily available, and sort of pushed in the culture. I think, I feel like there's a danger of it being popularized and sort of put out there and used as a way to kind of pacify people. And that's if people allow themselves to be pacified by it, and aren't on a spiritual journey, or a journey of elevating consciousness, and are just kind of pulled into the idea of it, the idea of you know, tripping balls or whatever. Like, now you know, it's like, I hope you get what I'm saying. So
I do.
it's like a balance thing. Like, this is great, and maybe it's not necessary for everybody, I think, but there are many of us that obviously we have benefited from this. But it's a self journey, and we have to be, I think, for some people, yeah, uh, maybe getting help with from experts with that is important. For others, I think it has to be a self-directed journey. And this ties to what we've talked about on the show, or what Rich and Tony get into, and they're much more well versed on this than I am. But the seeming sort of origins of religious practices and religious rites, and all the symbolism with the Vatican and the Pope, and the Liberty Cap. This stuff is sort of encoded in a lot of our mythology and religious practices. So Rich jokes about Jesus being a mushroom, and I don't know if that was Terrence McKenna. And obviously, go check out some. I wish I could tell you which ones, but it comes up now and then. The Grand Theft World podcast. It's I think there's something there to these entheogens, and a communion with God or a higher power that one encounters, and you have to be careful, and I think you have to. I don't know. Yeah, I've definitely benefited from some microdoses, and every now and then a larger dose, and I know, you know, I but I don't see that it's like something I have to do forever. It's not. I'm open to feeling like like I can move past that, but it is a tool. It seems is a tool that seems to be beneficial.
Man, that's really well said. I got a lot I want to touch on that, but first we got a comment from the very beautiful, kind
Hey,
Orwell
Orwell
Huxley
Huxley.
here. This young lady
Our
tells us, used for pharmaceuticals instead of its intended use. I definitely do not want government weed or mushrooms. I wonder if LD felt the numbness of emotions with SSRIs. Is that something you felt?
Absolutely, absolutely,
What was that
yeah.
like? What do you mean? Like you felt that? What does that mean? Numbness of emotions?
Um, well, just a disconnectedness from feeling, and I guess men in general, we we're less in touch with our feelings than women. So finding that communication and balance in relationships is already a challenge. But when you have something that's kind of blocking and getting in the way and making that even harder, it's tough. And so yeah, you could ask my wife about that.
Mm.
Something she would comment on often, and I think she would say that it's gotten better, and and I'm still on a journey, but it's been changing for the better. But absolutely, Hux, yeah, you're right on the money there.
Yeah, it's in some ways, her comment makes me think about the another problem with SRIs that I've never thought of before. If it's for depression, why would you take something that makes you feel alienated? It seems to me that numbness of emotions is definitely something that would alienate you if you can't feel closeness, if you can't feel love. You know, I guess maybe the thought is that, well, if we can cure the anger, if we can cure the depressive thoughts, they don't talk about curing all the or curing. They don't cure anything. But I mean, if they loosen or they numb some of the depression, I guess they're saying it's okay to numb some of the love or numb some of the other stuff. But it just seems so alienating.
Sure, and but it's not addressing underlying
Yeah.
causes. It's not getting to the root of things, and I think it contributes to stunting emotional growth. Um, Obviously, and this is something Rich touches on often with the prolonged adolescence, delayed
Mm,
delayed delayed growth, um, and people used to go through rites of passage at an early age.
yeah.
They and I have a new friend that I've been hanging out with. That's he's an author and a marksman. Um, and he, in his view, he's like, you get I forgot I always said it, but at a certain point, a boy's ready for a BB gun, and then you give him a 22, and then by the time he's 12 or something, he should have a good rifle, and but it's something along those lines. But so that is an example. Firearms teach responsibility because you have to respect it, you have to understand how it works, and you have to be very tuned in to your surroundings and your actions because firearm is a way of projecting your will at great distance instantaneously. So it's that's another thing that, like, not wanting people to grow up understanding firearms is a way of delaying growth, of delaying a rite of passage,
Yep.
and robbing people of that experience, that opportunity to learn responsibility. And oh gosh, I forgot I was tying that back, but well, yeah, just rites of passage and delayed, prolonged adolescence. That was the main point there.
Yeah, it's well put. I'm going to backtrack for just a moment. And you brought up a lot of good points about psychedelics. And I find myself falling into this trap sometimes of that psychedelics are a panacea that are going to cure a lot of things. I really like them, but that's not true. They're not a panacea. They may help a lot of things, but with everything that is helpful also comes a diet of destruction because things can be abused. They don't have to be addictive to be abused. That being said, you know, I that being said, let me take a page out of Rich's book and present some books here for people to think about. Everybody knows about Brave New World. And in Brave New World, people take Soma whenever they get stressed, when they're mad. It's like this panacea of emotional management that people take. Soma, there was a book called Soma, and it was about the Amanita muscaria, and it's about the substance that they took in the Bhagavad Gita, like this great drug that helped everything. And that's probably where Huxley got it from. However, while everybody knows about the book Brave New World, there's another book that was written by Huxley called The Island. And in this book, The Island, it was a book about a different kind of utopia. And I hesitate to use the word utopia because it was actually this small knit group of really intelligent people. And on the island, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but isn't it weird that in the book Brave New World, the lead characters who cause all this trouble, they get banned to an island. And now there's this other book called The Island. And on the island, they use mushrooms. And he talks about how they use it for kids at the age of 12 to go through rites of passage. He talks about how they
Wow.
use it to be in communion with the world. And it gave me a whole different perspective on Huxley. Like I still see him as a social engineer that, that comes from a long line of people that want to shape the way the world works in a specific way. But reading the book The Island allowed me to see the other side of his thinking. It was like, here's how we're going to live. And if you look at the way in which he deemed the elite should live, it seems to me that should be the way everybody should live. Maybe there's a problem there with education. Maybe there's a problem with people, that they don't want, the useless eaters, whatever the heck that means. Like, I can understand how in some societies, maybe when it gets too big, you can't have all the things that you wish your society could have. But I wanted to bring that up on the topic of mushrooms before we move forward. I do think it's important to note that a lot of the work that is being done, it can be used for nefarious reasons, and especially if we allow big pharma to come in and start manipulating it the way they've manipulated the current set of vaccines, or we allow the substance that helps us to become commercialized into a means of profit, something that's only for profit right there. So I wanted to address that again, but I wanted to also talk about rites of passage. I'm glad you brought this up. It seems that one thing we could do to move our society forward is return to some rites of passage. In some of the South American continents, the women, the young girls have quinceañeras where they become a woman, and there's these different things that are still out there. But for a man, there really is no rite of passage. It seems like maybe beating some video game or something like that, but there's no real community around a rites of passage. And I like what you said about firearms. Firearms are a way to teach men the way they've been taught as hunters back in the day. Like, look, you're responsible for your family. You're responsible, and you are a killing machine. You have the ability to kill, to murder, and you must understand, you must integrate these into your system. What are some other things you can think about when we talk about rites of passage?
And just to touch on that, I
Yeah.
mean that you're echoing Jordan Peterson there. I think with the how does he put it? Just a beast, recognizing that
Yes.
I don't know if that's the phrase he uses, but recognizing that you have um, the potential to be a monster, but you can control it, and then you harness that. So I just want to express that. But
Well done.
other rites of passage. I mean, um, well, yeah. Let's say food, and I think this. I caught a little bit. I was listening to one of your previous episodes where you guys are talking about death, and acceptance of that, or going through death and ritual. And so, you know, I'm hanging out where I am, and by the way, I don't have a ranch. I'm just privileged to found myself hanging out on one and making myself useful, and enjoying the benefits of being in a community where they're very conscious about the food production, and it's pretty clean eating, and there's raw milk down the road, and
Mm.
fresh eggs, and bison slaughtered on site. And but the food thing, like, we've got a friend, Jay Noon, uh, that we're helping to produce a course here about like dopamine rewiring, and you know instead of giving your kids screen time, you have them pick eggs, you have them feed pigs. So that's, for Jay, his perspective is like that's an early rite of passage. Like, I think 2 years old, his daughter was, well, even before that, he just, he had her in a carrying her on his chest. He'd go out and get the eggs, and she's observing all this, and pretty soon she's able to walk, and she's doing it herself. And then she moves on to, mixing up yogurt and stuff, feeding it to the pigs and to the chickens. And so there's a rite of passage right there, learning how to take care of a creature, and then you're going to move along to where you've got to slaughter that creature that you've raised and taken care of, and you got to take its life, and you have to accept that, and give thanks, and take in that food and nourish your body. And I think that's a powerful rite of passage there. People that grow up on a farm, or just more closely connected to their food supply, death is not such a scary thing. I think it. I think you learn. I think that you learn there that the death is a part of life, the cycle, and it's something that can be dealt with and talked about. Obviously, people, loved ones, it's different, but I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I think that is beneficial. I think that helps us just stay grounded, and not fear death so much. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's really well put. I like the idea of the introduction of rites of passage at all ages. Maybe there should, you know, maybe that's what birthdays should be. They should be a celebration of a rite of passage. Hey, you've made it. In Hawaii, there's a big celebration for the first birthday. And coming from Caucasian acres where I lived in, I move out here and there's just so many different cultures that I learned so much. And I'm like, what? I don't understand. Why does everybody have a birthday party for the first year? And it's because so many kids die before the first year. When a kid makes it to the first year, it's like, okay, now we can all take a collective deep breath. Ah, we made it. Yeah, let's celebrate. Chances of that child dying now are a lot less than they were. And that in
Mm,
itself is a rite of passage. And
mm.
I it's interesting. I'm wondering if when you went to South America, you learned some of the same things that I'm learning now, is that the way in which the rest of the world lives, and by rest of the world, I mean the world outside of gigantic cities, the world outside of Western culture. I'm wondering if you got to see, for me, it's almost like a look back to how our country probably used to be, with a extended family where everybody lives together. Where in California, where I lived, when I was 17, I was like, okay, I got to get out of here, man. I'm never going to get a girlfriend if I don't have a car. I'm never going to get a girlfriend if I don't live by myself. I'm a loser if I live with my parents. There's
Mm.
all this crazy just garbage in my head about what I should be in order to be perceived as someone worthwhile. And it's amazing looking back at like how I had all that in my head, and you start thinking about how it got in your head. But when I came to Hawaii, I've noticed that there's like this giant, extended family. So you have, and I think this may be common for other parts of the world. When my traveling, I've gone to Mexico, I've spent some time in South America, but I see this same idea of a family unit where the grandparents and the parents and the kids live together. And there's so much wisdom a grandparent has. There's so much wisdom a parent has, especially when you find you're a new parent. When you become a new parent, you realize you don't know anything. You don't know nothing, and you give your kid to your mom, or you give your kid to your grandparents, and you're just like, how do they know all this? And back home, when we're so separated, we have decided, at least in the West where I came from, that we're gonna privatize the jobs. The old folks, your grandparents are gonna go to a home, the parents are gonna go to work, and the kids are gonna go to a school. And you guys are never together. You're always working. You're always doing something. But it seems to me that is the very foundation where that is the very right turn where we went wrong. Maybe not 100%, but when I look at the families here, there's so much more intact. There's so much more love. There's so much less hatred towards the self, it seems like to me. And I'm curious if you have found something similar when you travel to South America.
Um, I think I definitely observed that. I was only down there about 3 months. Um, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I was just thinking, we, we have like these constructed rites of passage in,
Mhm.
you know, it's like Americanism or global homo, if you will, global homogenization, the exportation of this culture creation, where yeah, it's like you move out of the house, you get a fast car, you get a well, you got to get a job first. Nothing wrong with getting a job, but
Right.
it's like you get a job at a fast food place, like you flip burgers or whatever, like. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm
Agreed.
the point is like you could be doing lots of different jobs, but lots of different jobs are kind of closed off because, well, minimum wage, they're forced to pay a certain amount, so you can't get in and just, make a little bit in exchange for the value that you have while you increase your value over time. But yeah, just, pop culture and fashion, it's
Right.
all like these are the kind of the touchstones or the benchmarks for our development over time versus yeah, practical skills that are tied in with a family unit like you're describing. And that where I'm hanging out, there's a community here that they've got like three generations now of kids. I mean, the kids now are like a third generation that have been raised right there, and they're doing farm work and dairy, operating dairy, and um, yeah, it's a different vibe to put it one way, but yeah, it's like it's a it's a different atmosphere than you find in Southern California.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I think maybe that's the difference. One of the main differences between the city and the more rural areas is that there's a different understanding of what a family is. And when you put two people from those different cultures, because it is two different cultures, you know, if you have someone that's on a farm versus someone that's in a city, we're all we're all people, but we have two different understandings of the family unit. And I think that the people that live on a farm are more closely related to the land. They're more understanding of, hey, if I want to eat meat, I'm gonna have to kill Betsy out here, you know, and that's okay because that's why we raised Betsy, you know. But when you look at the way in which someone lives in a city, it's so automated and it's so, you know, almost synthetic, the way in which we live in those places, and it takes you away from the land. It takes you away from being grounded. And so I see that similarity between people who live in, and I guess maybe Hawaii is a lot like a farm. Obviously, there's big cities, and you look at places that are not as industrialized. And I guess this kind of gets us back to the Prussian school model, right? We can just take this thing full circle back to education. Education leads one to live a life in one of these synthetic cities, and they've trying to do away with people living out off the land and being self-resilient. They want you to be dependent on the system so that you'll work for the system and continue to perpetuate the system instead of working for yourself. Does that sound accurate? What do you think about that?
Yeah, you're right on the money, and you're echoing, what I said about specialized jobs and just kind of being okay and reliant upon a whole bunch of systems that you're not really aware of and you don't have to think about. You don't have to think about it, dude. And
Yeah.
you,
That's
um,
funny. Most
um,
people nice pull.
oh no, I threw off my flow,
Sorry.
but that was no, you didn't. I oh geez, yeah. Oh geez, what were you saying though about
We were talking about
the education system?
education and how it echoes the what we're learning and living in the cities versus living
Oh
on the farms.
yeah. Well, and I was gonna mention Ernie Hancock that I've been hanging out with up here, and his whole occupy the land hashtag occupy the land thing. And I came up here to help him build a geodesic dome, build multiple domes. And but it's not really about the domes. Domes are awesome, and he's been building domes for years. But his thing more so is showing what can be done with a limited amount of resources, but working together with people. And you've got a spot of land and you can throw up this structure. So it doesn't have to be a dome, but they're leaving tomorrow. He and Donna are headed back to Phoenix. It's getting cold up here. They're ready to get out of town, but he is all revved up because they're going back to Arizona. He's going to find a piece of land. He's going to throw down and start building a house. But he kind of wants to make a thing out of it. And it's like, I've got my land. I want to do what need to do. Leave me alone. Um, I'm gonna take care of myself and mine. And yeah, it's the opposite of, because he said they want you in a van down by the river or in the shoebox. I mean, look at that city that they're building, the line in Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it.
It's
No.
it's just this. It's like the height of the Empire State Building, and I don't know how wide. Maybe a couple container ships wide, and just this big glass strip for miles and
Wow.
miles and miles. And they want to put 9 million people in this fancy looking box. And I'm sure that's all well and good, but you probably got to abide by certain rules. And you know, I guess if you don't want to, if you walk out the door, good luck. You're in the middle of the desert. So Yeah, I mean, clearly, like, you know, you'll own nothing and be happy. Everything's moving towards a rent,
Hmm.
rent services rather than own
Right.
things. And the food system is under attack. I think
Without a
it's
doubt.
been very clearly documented. A lot of these food processing plant things in the past year, especially, like, it's just not an organic thing that's happening. I'll refer to No Agenda podcast one more time, and Adam Curry, talking to this guy Texas Slim, pointed out, like, these facilities have sprinkler systems for insurance purposes. You don't have fires that burn down facilities like this. Like, they go out, they're put out. I could be wrong, but it there's a whole lot of things happening, and it seems to it just so that they're trying to steal the real and sell us the fake, as James Evan Pilato
Right.
often says. So, they're trying to turn facilities like that, into GMO garbage slop food facilities. And unfortunately, a lot of people they're gonna lap it up. And I don't know, we have to get the word out to more people. Um, that's something I'm really passionate about. I want to keep talking to people about raw milk, raw dairy. I think that so many people that don't understand the deception there, and the issues that are caused by that whole system. And yeah,
Yeah, I thoroughly believe that we are in a fight for abundance versus scarcity. And the people in positions of authority want there to be scarcity. When you're in scarcity, you have a scarcity mindset and you're scared and you're reactive instead of proactive. But the truth is, like, and when it comes to food, you know, I think that, when is the last time you saw multiple planes hit multiple food processing plants? Like, that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And I could see how some of them, I bet you some of them are being, without a doubt, I'm sure they're being pressured to either quit through regulation or sell. And I think some of the fires are those own people like, okay, well, I'll just set this thing on fire, take the insurance money because I'm going to go under anyway. But I do think that when you see like the Gates Foundation buying all the farmland, when you see people in Australia and the school students already eating all these bugs, I think they're setting up a false choice of like, okay, you don't want to eat the lab grown meat, then eat the bugs. You can have your choice, like this illusion
hmm
of choice. But
yeah,
yeah, you can see this idea through the mindset of business. They call it like a blue ocean strategy. We're going to create a whole new world of business that we can exploit. And it starts by getting rid of food. It starts by privatizing all the water. We're going to privatize everything and then we're going to run it, and I don't, my sister investigates corporate security fraud and she cut her teeth on Enron. So I paid attention to that whole Enron scandal, especially being from California. Excuse me. And in California, what they did is they would have these rolling blackouts. But it was the power companies that called the power companies were called and told, hey, we need you to shut down the grid because of an overload. Even though there wasn't an overload, they were shutting down the grid when it was at peak times because that was when the corporations were losing the most money. So now that they have been almost completely privatized in California, you could put the two grids together or a graph that shows what Enron did versus what PG&R are doing now or what all these companies are doing now. And I bet you they would line up perfectly. We've gotten away from the idea that the government funding, well, I'm not a huge fan of government, but I do think that when there's not a profit motive involved, when government is managing our resources, there's no need for profit. So they can have people drive 1,000 miles or 400 miles to go check power lines, where a private company doesn't want to do that because there's no money involved in it. A private company wants to shut down people doing their wash at 3 o'clock because everybody does it at that time. They want to shut down your water supply at this time because everybody's doing it. They don't want to waste everything because they have to go out and repair it. They look at it from this small-minded, profit-driven model. And the same way we're privatizing resources in California, that's the model for the rest of the state. You can see it happening. And I think that is this idea of scarcity. Like, we don't have to live in scarcity. We have the ability to live in abundance. And I wish more people would adopt this idea of we can continue to grow responsibly instead of having to take this Malthusian angle of just getting rid of half the population and getting rid of people and designating them useless eaters. And I'm curious to what you think about how do you see, if you could give me two ideas. One is if we continue to go down the road we're going, in your mind, what does the future look like in 10 years? And if we were to change things, how could it look like in 10 years? If you give me a negative side and then a positive side.
Ooh. Well, first of all, you just keep echoing stuff that Rich goes through in the autonomy course, and you probably, I'm not. I mean, it's not an accusation.
I understand exactly what
It's
you're saying. We're on the same page, man.
Yeah. It's like you've been through the autonomy course, but wow, 10 years. I mean, I think things could get pretty rough. I think things are going to get a lot worse than yeah, before they get better, and hopefully not too bad. I hope nuclear war. I hope that isn't a real option on the table. I mean, I question how you know. I think it's just used as a fear tactic, and like you're talking about, scarcity mindset. Like that's something we have to unlearn going through the autonomy course. Well, there's a whole there's a whole bunch of vectors of attack to keep people in the scarcity mindset. So you're right on the money with that, and I think that's going to continue. And I think the fight now, obviously we're in a fifth generational warfare where the the war that I think we're in a civil war. It's been going on a while, and it crosses borders even. I think it's bigger than just this country and thinking north and south, that kind of thing. It's very messy, and yeah, I don't know, we have an opportunity to push back, to transmit these broadcasts, try to get people's attention, and at the very least give them something down the road, a time capsule to help make some sense of how we got to where things are. Yeah, ultimately, I don't know. I think humanity is going to win out on the anti-human agenda. I do think it's going to be a bumpy ride, and people need to prepare accordingly. But that doesn't mean living in fear, and it doesn't mean you know living in despair or having despair at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you know, after talking to you for a while, it confirms this idea that I had that people. First off, let me start this particular thought by saying that suffering is growth. I believe that the purpose of tragedy is because there's a force bigger than you can imagine that has decided that you are strong enough to go through this thing and then come out the other side and help other people. I think that is what tragedy is, the purpose of tragedy. And I know that a lot of people who find themselves in a tragic event always ask themselves, why me? And that's the answer. At least it's a good mindset that if you find yourself in a tragedy, if you apply this mindset, it'll totally help you. So I hope people apply that. And that's my firm belief in that. What I what I have been confirmed by talking to you is that people who have had or struggle with depression are usually some of the deepest thinkers that I meet, because they spend so much time suffering. They spend so much time asking themselves the difficult questions of, oh God, is this me? Fuck, I hate this. And like they can't run away and hide in something else. They must face that question. And that's what seems to lead to this depression, is that you're constantly asking yourself the most difficult questions possible. So when I speak to people who have had depression, I'm always amazed at their level of thought, the way they choose words, the way they're careful choosing words, the way they're careful with their thoughts. Like I think that in some ways, depression makes the best philosophers out there. And I just wanted to tell you, thank you for having a conversation. And before we continue to move on, I just wanted to get that out there.
My pleasure. I'm enjoying this, and
Yeah, me too.
we didn't plan on any of this, and
Right.
I yeah I well, speaking of philosophy, I mean, I you know I'll admit I need to study more. Like I haven't ingested all of Tony's
Yeah. His logic course.
philosophy material, but I have certainly learned along the way and working with him and Rich, and I'm excited. You know, Jay Dyer's doing his philosophy course. We had week one last week, and I'm going to be helping out with the production on that. So I look forward to getting into that because I have gotten a lot of value from his perspective and his material over the past few years uh, with regards to philosophy. But I need to dig a lot deeper. But you're helping me realize that the potential I have for that, and I appreciate people tolerating sometimes. My delivery is stuttered, and you know, I'm not I'm not claiming to be a deep thinker, but I think recognizing the capacity for that, and I need to cultivate that a bit more,
Yeah, I
and
think it's true.
work on my speaking, public speaking. I could do that.
I think everybody can do that. Like it's difficult to, I think it was Christopher Hitchens who said, he who develops himself as a public speaker and does it well will never have to sleep or dine alone.
Mm,
But yeah,
well said.
yeah, exactly. You know, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this overwhelming blanket of propaganda that's just being pushed out there through the, whether it's talk radio or it's television or social media even. It just seems like it's been ratcheted up to like a 12. And
Mm,
I for me, one of my biggest pet peeves right now, or in the last couple of weeks, was this idea of who blew up this pipeline. And they give you this false choice of like, was it Russia or was it the US? Was it us? And people don't understand that by saying it's us, you automatically implement everybody. It's not us. We didn't have anything to do with it. You know, it's a loose conglomeration of multinational corporations and family offices and maybe some, you know, some hedge funds or something, or some sort of other nefarious characters, but it's not us. It's not us as a nation. And I wish people could begin to see that we are not the America that you were taught in school. And in fact, we've become this sort of puppet for the British Empire, or we've become this puppet for multinational corporations and stuff. What is your take on the propaganda out there? And what do you think are some things we can do to help people see through it?
yeah. You know, Rich often says the U.S. is just like the property manager for the British Empire. We're not really one of the overt crown colonies, the crown countries, but you know, we're sort of acting like one on the down low without truly understanding. To answer your question, if I could can I share my
Yeah,
screen?
please, man. I think so.
Because I came across an interesting article last night, um, and all right, do you have to drag it in?
There we go.
Yeah. So here, I'll go to the original.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you've come across Jinx on Twitter.
I haven't. No, I'm
He's a
excited to hear this.
video editor.
Okay.
Let me see if well, there's a particular style of editing. Um, let me see. I think he just got he's constantly getting banned on on Twitter. All right, sorry. I'll share. I'll find something later. Share with you. Maybe some of the audience is familiar. But have you seen this Ghost in the Machine clip that
No,
the army put out?
no.
Um, we could play it. I mean, it's a few minutes long, but and
Let's
then we
play
could
it.
talk about yeah, what's
It's a great idea.
let me yeah, it's 3 minutes long. This surfaced a few months ago. I think we played it on the show. It's very well made. Look, they're quoting Sun Tzu. So it uses this cartoon character
As
from
the
the
world
1920s.
watches and listens in horror, the peaceful pro-democracy demonstration in China comes to a violent and bloody end.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Who's pulling the strings?
Wolves hiding nearby, whispering do or die around me. You say your last good night while I begin.
There is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
The ammunition used by Psywar.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldier, and at the same time,
Is expected and encouraged to study foreign languages and the social sciences such as history, economics, and sociology. He must have a broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
Gripping at my skin, the walls of night close in.
but the use of this force as an integral part of combat has now taken on new form.
As I wait
We are
to say
everywhere.
my last goodbye.
These are the
Wow.
Psywar soldiers.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's obviously a brilliantly made piece of propaganda that was put out on the Army's YouTube page. There's no credit given to it. So I found this article last night. Army tries incel marketing, and in this article, the author mentions that it'd be really hard to put out that video and not take credit for it. It's obviously somebody very talented or a team of people.
Yeah.
And they point out the Joker trailer. I guess I'm not sure if I've seen the trailer, but apparently, I'm familiar with the Joker symbolism and sort of they're tying it to. I suppose the media kind of ties it to incel culture, right wing extremism now as well. One of the points in the article is that it's unclear, like is this a message? Is this just a threat itself, or a sort of fear us? Look, we're everywhere, and you can come be a part of it. Like, what's this? This is cool, because apparently there've been some lengthy discussions in 4chan chats and stuff like that, and then people are just like, "Well, we actually don't give a fuck, but it looks cool." Or are they desperate to get people involved? And at the end of the article, so it closes this way. So these young guys could be effectively duped by good marketing, only to find themselves truly in clown mode, glorified customer service intake specialists on the front lines of the clown empire the Joker was born to destroy. The enemy whose mind the army controls may not be a foreign entity, but the targets of the recruitment campaign themselves. And I kind of skipped over it. Touches on earlier that this article is fascinating because it's from somebody who understands marketing and avatars and sort of a persona that you come up with. So it's definitely targeting a segment of the population that is now a target in the sense of, a potential domestic terrorist threat.
Mhm.
And I bring that up because, we recently had Whitney Webb. Sorry, here, let me. All right, and I brought to Rich's attention. What about main core base? And that was something that caught my eye. Ryan, Christian, and Whitney Webb earlier this year were writing about the looming threat of domestic terrorism, and specifically that the war on terror is shifting from the Middle East boogeyman to right wing white identitarian terrorists. And so when there was the Promise software and Al Qaeda, the base was developed. There was also a main core base developed, which is sort of the list for domestic terrorists. And I think the article, or one of the articles that Whitney or Ryan were writing about, was that we've got this situation where we're sending gobs of money to Ukraine. So our government is supporting a neo-Nazi supporting regime, with Zelensky, doing his Hava Nagila on the piano with his unit. And what happens? So this is me thinking, what happens when we've got good-hearted individuals going on over there and fighting on the side of these Azov battalion, fighting on the side of neo-Nazis, fighting against Russia? What happens when they start to figure out what's going on? They lose friends. They make it back and they survive. Now they're, battle hardened. And now they're questioning their government. And now perhaps they're a threat to the continuity of government, because that's what this is all about, is preserving the status quo and making sure there's nothing that's going to disrupt that, including people that are dissatisfied with how things are being run. So it's like a built-in terror factory, I see potentially. I hope not. And so thanks for sort of going on that journey. I could have been a little more organized with that. But so to address your question, what do we do? Again, we're in a 5th generation warfare. And one of the things that stuck with me from Mark Passio is that he refers to Quigley writing in Tragedy and Hope that the rifle was the equalizer, keeping tyranny at bay. And now, while, that's still true to an extent, because eventually, an RPG or a tank is going to take out a rifleman. The personal computer is sort of the rifle of the 21st century in fifth generational warfare. So everybody's been corralled into these, these devices, your Fondle Slab, your Black Mirror, your laptop, your Chromebook, your iPad, and there's all kinds of cool free tools. And gee whiz, look what I can do on my device. But there's all kinds of hidden, not opportunity costs, but if the product is, sorry, if the service is free, you're the product, and it's all this data mining. So I think becoming literate, and this is Passio again, literacy no longer is being able to read and write. Literacy is knowing the tools of production, of publication, and that is embodied in a desktop computer, a personal computer, and understanding video and audio and publication to websites, hosting websites. So I guess that's my long answer to what do we do. I think teach others and help others understand the power of being a producer. And this is something that drew me into Rich's autonomy course. He would talk about we have this this input overload. We're overloaded by grammar, let's say, to tie it back to the trivium. So how do you balance out? Like, how do you take your input and you organize it with the processing, the rhetoric, the logic, and then how do you output that and become a producer with your rhetoric, your output? How do you move from consumption to production? And I think it's through learning the tools on the personal computer, and then certainly building a library if you can, and having physical books to reference. So yeah, I mean, I think we're experimenting with that right now. Rich did the Peace Revolution podcast. He's done many productions. What You've Been Missing. He and Tony were trying to go for a sort of news anchor kind of vibe or that kind of presentation. And they were also kind of struggling with the tools they had at the time. And now struggling to do what we're doing now. Now the tools exist thanks a lot to the gaming realm, and thanks to kind of to like COVID and the push to get everybody doing Zoom meetings. Like that stuff's gotten more readily available and upgraded and works better. So now we use those tools to broadcast these transmissions and give substantive media out there to people in the present and hopefully in the future. And then I don't know, I mentioned Jinx. I'll have to find some videos, send to you, and maybe you can have something in the show notes about it. But he does get banned quite frequently, so hard to pin down. But yeah, like that's one approach. I don't know. That's somebody using the tools kind of demonstrated in that Psywar recruiting tool or propaganda piece or both, and using it to tie a bunch of very seemingly disconnected footage together and express within 2 minutes or less a complex set of connections, whether it's about the Oklahoma City bombing or 9/11 or Mena, Arkansas, and President George H.W. Bush and Iran-Contra. Concepts like that are put to music and presented in a quick format. And I don't know, for some that might be a turnoff. I think for some, especially, Gen Z, TikTok brains, I think it's a way to get their attention and draw them in. I could be wrong. And, one thing I wasn't able to express quite clearly, but if you read that somewhere in there, it describes this, not a vortex, but it's an interesting thing going on where, I mean, you think about the media is the message, and Marshall McLuhan,
Yep.
and it's kind of a mind fuck. Like, are we, by making stuff like that, showing people this horrific stuff, are we contributing to, like, is that what the system wants for us to want to destroy it? Because it seems like they're invested in riling people up and showing off, this is what we do, and what are you going to do about it? You know, now you're a target for us. So I don't know if that follows clearly, but I'll share the link to that article with you
Yeah, please.
for the show notes as well, and maybe we can get some feedback from the audience. But that was a long answer.
That was a great answer, man. Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot in there. I think that is a great strategy for people who want to make a difference. The first part is to understand that you can make a difference. You have all the tools you need to make a difference at your disposal today that 10, 5, even 5 years ago, people didn't have. And you can make a difference. You might get banned here and there, but you start another account, and who knows what goes viral? Who knows what 3-minute video or 30-second video could change the mind of an adolescent that could grow up to be somebody that changes the world themselves. Like, we do have the ability to paint pictures in the minds of other people. And maybe that's our job, is to educate. And, you know, I think there's a difference between education and indoctrination. And when you take out the meaning, when you take out the context, you're indoctrinating. But when you give people the context, when you give them the different understandings of what this could be, and you allow them to make that decision, then you're educating them. You're allowing them to take in the information and make the decision that they think is fit. And I think that's the difference between a propaganda video and a video that speaks more truth, if that kind of makes sense. I'm super thankful that you showed that video, and I'm super thankful that you explained it the way that you did. I think it makes a lot of sense. And that is something, it's easy to get caught up in the fear porn. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of the black pill. We're like, oh, they're just too powerful. We're all going to die. We can't do anything. But the truth is, we, as our enemy, as the people in power grow more powerful, so too do we grow more powerful. And the only power people have over you, regardless of where you're at, what time, the only power people have over you is the power you give them. If you don't give them power, they don't have power. You know, that's why laughter is such an amazing tool, is because you can laugh at people and it just deflates them and stuff. But Lawrence, I'm super excited to get to talk to you today, and this has exceeded my wildest expectations, man. I'm really thankful. Maybe we can do a series where you come back often and we can continue to do this and talk, and it's really fun for me. So I could talk to you for another hour and a half, but I got a truck to go drive. So
Yeah.
I have to get out of here, but
I'm grateful as well, and I really enjoyed it. I would love to do this again, and
Yeah.
you know, we could talk about a variety of things. And yeah, I have a friend too that I'm talking with that has a little experience from the operational side of psychological warfare, and he's talked about doing a show and laying out sort of the grammar of.
let's bring him on. Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. But thank you so much, George. This has been really fun, and really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, so before we go, why don't you tell people about the Freedom United Revolt and what you got going on there?
Oh yeah, that's a t-shirt store. I saw you checked out the site, and we could bring. Can you? Let's
I got it right here. There you go.
pop that up on the screen.
Boom.
Yeah, I've got a new shirt in honor of Ernie Hancock. Make 'em make ya. freedomsphoenix.com. And it's a t-shirt store my wife and I started, and Rich throws a lot of ideas at me, but it really kind of started with this. I wanted to make a shirt that said I'm part of the control group. So it was an exercise in making that happen. And we've got somebody contributing designs and a variety of stuff. To quote Ernie Hancock, they're highbrow humor t-shirt designs. But yeah, freedomunitedrevolt.com. Check it out. People got a lot of satisfied customers, so definitely want more people to see that. And I want to do more with that. I really love what Ernie does with freedomsphoenix.com. Of course, he's up on IPFS, so he's got his parallel internet. FU, it's not going away. It's mine. I'd love to do maybe some publishing, or at least linking to stuff. I do have like an allies page on the website that directs to a bunch of people that I think are worth checking out. And yeah, that's it. And I produced the Grand Theft World podcast. You can check it out at grandtheftworld.com. We've got a community. There's a whole lot of value inside of there, and ability to jump in and listen to kind of pre-show and post-show and listen in on the Zoom call. And we've got a bi-weekly town hall with Tony Myers, and Rich pops in sometimes, and I hang out from time to time, and it's a lively discussion, a lot of great minds, an opportunity to get involved. And and season 8 of Autonomy just kicked off. If it's something you've heard about or want to know more about, you can check out getautonomy.info/ignite. And it's not too late to jump in and get on a blueprint call and see if it's something that could benefit your life.
Yeah, I would recommend everybody check out the Grand Theft World podcast. I would definitely recommend going to Freedom United Revolt, picking yourself up some gear to get people talking. It's a great way to have people stop you out in public and start talking to you, find like-minded people. And if you want to reach out, is there what's the best place if people wanted to reach out to you on the topic of producing, or if they wanted to pick your brain about some of the things we talked about, what's the best place to reach you at?
Yeah, you can message me on Twitter at subdialectsound. At subdialect, like dialect, at subdialectsound. That's my Twitter handle. I'm accessible there. And or if you're on Discord, you can find me. I think it's just Subdialect on Discord. But yeah, stay tuned. I think I'm gonna get something going here soon to get out in front of a bunch of people if they're interested, and see what I can help them learn.
That's so awesome, man. I'm looking forward to all that you got coming up, and I'm looking forward to maybe doing a weekly or a bi-weekly show with you, and just, it's a really great conversation, and I'm stoked that you and the GTW team are out there doing what you're doing. I think you're making the world a little bit better, and I really think people would enjoy listening to the content you guys have. You guys have a positive message. You guys have a great way of communicating to people that is not, it's not overwhelming, and people can take in the message and they can breathe in as much as they want to, or they can learn a certain amount and then go away and then come back always. But it's such an inviting show. Lawrence, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. The links will be in the show notes. Thank you to everybody who participated in the chat. We're super thankful to have you here and participating. We love everybody, and we're looking forward to building a better future and a better tomorrow. So hang on one second. I'm going to close the broadcast, but I still want to talk to you for a moment. Aloha, everybody. Thank you.